I noticed the feeling early. Not as fear, not as a warning, just a quiet sense that something didn't fully sit right. Nothing was obviously wrong, no argument, no tension anyone else seemed to notice. From the outside, everything looked normal. That's what made it easy to ignore. I told myself discomfort is part of life, that unfamiliar situations always feel a little off at first, that not every uneasy feeling means something is actually wrong. Those thoughts felt reasonable, responsible, like the kind of thinking adults are supposed to trust. I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to be impulsive. I didn't want to make decisions based on feelings I couldn't explain. So I stayed. At the time, staying didn't feel like a choice. It felt like patience, like maturity, like giving something the benefit of the doubt. I didn't realize then that staying is still a decision, especially when it feels passive. This is a story about that moment. The moment when something didn't feel right, and I decided that feeling wasn't enough to act on. The first time I noticed the shift, nothing around me had changed. I was standing in the kitchen doing something ordinary, waiting for the kettle to finish, watching the light reflect off the counter. And suddenly, I realized I was listening. Not to anything specific, just listening. The house sounded the same as always. The refrigerator humming, the clock ticking in the other room. But my attention had moved from resting to watching. I kept glancing toward the hallway without meaning to, pausing before turning my back to the room. It wasn't fear. Fear has direction. Fear points at something. This didn't. It felt more like standing slightly out of sync with the space I was in, like being half a step off without knowing why. I told myself it was nothing, that sometimes your body stays alert longer than your mind does, that stress lingers even when you don't feel stressed. Later that night, when I tried to sleep, I noticed the same thing. My thoughts were calm, but my body wouldn't fully relax. I shifted positions more than usual, listened to the room longer than I needed to. I remember thinking how strange it was to feel awake without being anxious. And then I did what I always did. I ignored it. The next few days passed quietly. Nothing happened. That became my proof. Everything looked fine. Everyone acted normal. No conversations felt tense. No moments stood out. So I started explaining the feeling away in small, logical steps. I told myself I was tired, that sleep schedules get off, that new routines take time to settle. Those explanations felt adult. When the feeling showed up during quiet moments, I filled the silence. Music playing softly, something on in the background. Anything steady and familiar. Silence had started to feel too open. I stopped calling the feeling discomfort. I called it awareness. Awareness sounded useful, something people admire. I told myself I was just paying attention, being observant, noticing details. Still, I caught myself rehearsing conversations before they happened, choosing words carefully even when nothing was at risk. That felt like thoughtfulness. But thoughtfulness started to take effort, and effort always leaves a trace. At some point, staying stopped feeling temporary. It became the default. I noticed it when I stopped imagining alternatives, stopped reminding myself that leaving was an option. Days blended together quietly. Nothing got worse, nothing got better. The feeling stayed exactly where it was. Consistent, low level, easy to live around. I told myself comfort takes time, that stability isn't immediate, that patience is a virtue. That idea sounded wise, so I committed to patience. But patience slowly turned into endurance. I became good at avoiding discomfort, good at adjusting. I noticed small reactions in my body before my thoughts caught up, a pause before entering certain rooms, a tightening before certain conversations. I noticed and kept going. Stopping would have meant asking questions I didn't want answers to. So I stayed.
What I didn't realize at first was how much energy all of this took. Not dramatic energy, just constant low-level management. I was always preparing, always adjusting. I avoided topics that made the feeling stronger. I chose when to be present and when to step back. It felt strategic. But by the end of the day, I felt tired in a way rest didn't fix. Not exhausted, just stretched thin, like something in me had been held slightly tense all day. I realized I hadn't felt fully relaxed in a long time. That realization didn't scare me. It made me sad, because it meant something had been asking for my attention, and I had been politely declining. One night, I asked myself a question. Not out loud, not dramatically, just quietly. If nothing changes, can I keep living like this? I didn't answer it, but the question stayed. It followed me through the next day, through ordinary moments. I noticed how often I reminded myself that nothing was technically wrong. Those reminders sounded rehearsed now. I wasn't discovering reassurance anymore. I was repeating it. The feeling hadn't grown stronger. That's what made it impossible to ignore. Urgency fades. Consistency doesn't. I realized I was spending more energy maintaining my reasons to stay than I would have spent listening to the feeling itself. Staying no longer felt like patience. It felt like maintenance. And maintenance always has a cost. It took time to understand what the feeling really was. I had treated it like a warning, something to solve. But it wasn't warning me about danger. It was protecting my alignment. I noticed how my body reacted when I imagined leaving. My shoulders lowered. My breathing slowed. There was relief. Staying required explanation. Leaving felt simple. Not easy, but simple. The feeling wasn't asking for proof. It was asking for honesty. I had been waiting for certainty. But clarity doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it just stops resisting when you move in the right direction. I didn't leave immediately. Understanding doesn't always lead straight to action, but something shifted. I stopped arguing with the feeling, stopped demanding explanations. That eased the pressure. Eventually, leaving became possible. Not rushed, not dramatic, just clear. I didn't wait for certainty. I listened without proof. And that was enough. Looking back, I don't judge myself for staying. I understand why I wanted reasons, why I wanted to be fair. But I've learned something. Not every decision needs to be defended. Some choices only need to be felt. Now, when that quiet sense of wrongness appears, I don't panic. I listen. Because sometimes the most honest information you get is simply the knowledge that something doesn't fit. And listening to that, even softly, can change everything after everyone sleeps.